you watch Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which is still a great film, but you go, what were they, why was there such prejudice? Why was there such hatred? But I think a lot of the change was initiated. I think film has a huge impact in our society, and I think Stanley Kramer's films made that kind of impact.
Thank you very much for the segue. Thank you so much. That was lovely. Let's have a nice hand here. Our next guest began modeling for the famous Paul Hesse and has appeared on countless magazines and billboards. A Max Factor face model photographed by Marilyn Monroe's favorite photographer, Wildinger. She debuted at 17 years old in her first motion picture, Stanley Kramer's The Sniper. This led to her lead role in Army Bound, for which she received solid reviews, and the cult classic, Bamba and the Jungle Girl.
That's gonna haunt me forever.
She was also in the Abbott and Costello show, with Lou Costello playing his fiancée.
Nice. Her other films include William Wellman's The High and the Mighty, starring John Wayne, a lavish film for which she received a Golden Globe for her performance. Soon following was A Man with a Gun opposite Robert Mitchum, her co-star from The High and Mighty. Life magazine named her the busiest actress on TV with good reason. She made appearances on the prestigious Hallmark Hall of Fame series, including the first episode, The Life of Moses, other anthologies like Playhouse 90, Studio One, and countless segments of shows like Wedding Breakfast, as well as being Aaron Spelling's Johnny Ringo, and Matinee Theater, for which she was Emmy nominated. Jerry Lewis then cast her in his big screen comedy, The Disorderly Orderly, and her life was changed forever. Stanley Kramer, filming his Ship of Fools on the next sound stage, asked her for a date, and 1 year later, she accepted. A few months after that, they wed, and she worked alongside Mr. Kramer for all his esteemed productions, including, but certainly not limited to, Inherit the Wind, It's a Mad, Mad World, and my personal favorite, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. The couple had 2 children and moved out of Beverly Hills and settled in Seattle, Washington, where they remained for over 10 years, as she wanted to raise her family beyond the Hollywood glare. Applause, please. She then opened a school for young people in the arts, which gave rise to many successful people in the industry today. Upon returning to Los Angeles in the early 90s, she produced her first film, the remake of her husband's High Noon for TBS. Since her husband's passing in 2001, she and her 2 daughters have their own production company, K&K Productions, and has established the Stanley Kramer Library, the Stanley Kramer Foundation, and also established the Stanley Kramer Award at the Producers Guild, of which she is a longtime member, and the Stanley Kramer Fellowship Award in Directing at UCLA. Both of these awards honor socially conscious young filmmakers. Let's have another round of applause for that, please. In 2012, she established Kramer Spence Entertainment, another company with her longtime writing partner, Rod C. Spence, and is in pre-production on several films. She is a longtime member of the Producers Guild of America. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Kramer.
Now, what mic am I going to use? You want me to sit in that chair over there?
Let's pass this one.
You think it'll reach?
Let's see.
Move the set.
If not, I'll just give you.
I'll be-
Why don't we?
I'll be
I'll
the-
give you this one.
You want to give me that one?
This one.
I don't think I need it. Do you think I need it?
Wait.
No.
I don't think I
Yes.
need it. You mind? Oh, you want me to have it because you're filming. And all of that history, and I'm only 20 years old.
There you go.
Well, so I'm so fascinated with this guy because what an education tonight about the books and the things you're doing. I mean, how lucky am I to have him write about Stanley? I better hide some of the things I don't want you to know, because you're going to find out anyway, right? Anyway, it's a great pleasure to meet you finally.
Thank you.
It's been a phone friend for about a year now.
Thank you, Karen.
You do that a lot, don't you?
Phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
But I'm honored. Karen, we're going to have just an amazing book that really is going to honor the life of her husband and Karen.
Now,
and,
when is
and
that
Kat.
due out?
Hopefully it's going to be next year.
And this is
That's
also
soon?
with
My goodness, that's soon?
We hopefully next fall.
Simon and Schuster, yes? Or no?
Maybe.
It's a big life, it's a big life, and it's a historical one too.
It's
Starting in Hell's Kitchen, New York.
Oh, it's an amazing story.
Well, in the day he was born, in 1913, the year he was born, in that environment was considered the armpit of America, actually. You had three choices if you were born in Hell's Kitchen in 1913. You could become a priest, a prize fighter, and more than often you went to jail. That was what your outcome was going to be if you were, your future if you were born in Hell's Kitchen at that time. So he overcame a lot of obstacles. He never knew his father. His father left his mother the first year of his life. And he was raised by a single parent, which of course in those days was a real stigma for a woman. Today it's very prevalent, but not in 1913. I don't know how she did it. She must have been a hell of a mother with a lot of values, because it was if it didn't really touch him, but it formed his values. He entered NYU at 15, graduated at 19, and won a writing contest. He was a really good writer. But I won't go into Stanley Kramer completely, because that's what the book's going to be about. But I think it's inspiring, because we have single families today, single parent families, and it doesn't matter what your beginnings are, it really matters what you do with your life and how you overcome those obstacles, which he certainly did. So,
Well, I mean, there's so much heart. There's so much heart in all of his films. I rewatched.
Yeah.
I think I need
I want to hear that voice.
Okay, all right.
I rewatched Inherit the Wind the other night. I mean, just lovely. And Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was just a classic in so many ways. And you see the heart and soul. There's no vulgarity in these films.
He
There's
never
no.
had it. No, he never did that in any of his films.
And tell us why.
I think he had taste. I think he had very good taste. I think he was a very good writer himself, and he reached for a standard, which I think in those days, really when he started, we did have higher standards in film. We had, unfortunately, the Breen office, which wouldn't let us do certain things, but Stanley never would do it. I don't think he would ever even think of it. If a character would speak in a certain way, he probably would allow it.
Right.
Which he did in Bless the Beasts and Children. When the kids were very young, they were speaking like that, and he thought it would be more the right thing to do, to go that way. But he never did that. I did want to talk a little bit about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Please,
Because
please.
when we made that film, it's when I just married Stanley, and he was preparing that film. And we both knew that if Columbia Pictures, who distributed the film, had read the script, they never would have allowed us to make it, because interracial marriage was against the law in 16 states when we made it. So they kept saying, well, Stanley, what's this film about? Well, it's a love story. Is it not a love story? And it stars, Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy and Sidney Poitier. He was pretty, well known at that time, and they trusted his judgment and they trusted his films. He had, had 85 Oscar nominations in his 35 films. They weren't going to question him too much. So once we began filming in San Francisco, because the story takes place in San Francisco, we felt fairly safe at that point because we were already shooting. And they demanded to see the screenplay. So we sent it to them, of course. And the minute they read it, they canceled the film. And we had to come back from San Francisco. It had never happened to Stanley before, being canceled. And Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn and everybody was pretty darn shocked. So for a couple of days, Stanley was pacing up and down the living room. He didn't know what to do. And suddenly, because I used a very good excuse, and it was really a good excuse, and it was really partly true. Spencer Tracy couldn't be insured. But Stanley had just made with Spencer Tracy, Inherit the Wind, Judgment at Nuremberg. It's a mad, 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 mad world. He knew how to work with Tracy. He only worked 2 hours in the morning, and he would send him home. And, but it was hard to insure it. That was true. But that was not the reason they canceled that film. And to be fair to Columbia Pictures, not good to have a film you can't show really in 16 states unless you want to have a riot. So he got an idea, and he said, Karen, we're going to go see Kate Hepburn. And I said, okay. So he said, look at Kate. We know this is not the reason they're canceling the film. But he said, I'm going to put up my salary to insure Spence. Will you do the same? So are you kidding me? You're going to give up your salary? He said, yeah, absolutely. I believe in this film, and I believe in what it has to say. She said, well, if you're going to do that, I'll do it too. Then we went to Sidney Poitier, and he says, and I'll join you. So then we went to Columbia Pictures, and we said, okay, your picture's insured. So they had no legal reason not to go forward with the film. They had to. So we finished the film, and what did they do then? They opened it in a theater in Westwood called the Village Theater that had been in restoration for 3 years, and nobody knew it was open. But Stanley always said, you know, people have a sense about things. He never understood it. But I see it all the time, and I think if you think about it, you'll agree. Audiences have an instinct. The minute those doors opened in that was going to be restored theater, there were lines around the block, 15 blocks long.
Wow.
And the people just never stopped coming. It's one of the highest grossing movies of all time. Now, that film helped change the law. And you see, films can make a huge difference. They can
Absolutely.
change the way you think. They can change the world. They can change a lot of things. It doesn't always happen. And people will say, well, you know, I never thought of it quite that way. I don't know that I agree with it, but it makes me think. And that's the important thing.
Well, the great, yes. One of the so fascinating things about the film is that it's like almost hypnotic, the pacing of it. It plays almost, I'd say, like more like a stage play, yes. So was that obviously a conscious decision, of course, but do you remember any technique that he shared with you of his choices for doing that?
Well,
The pacing of it?
I know that when Stanley was making It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, William Rose and
There's
Tanya
4
Rose-
mads in that.
There's 4 mads. That's right. The writer, who was brilliant, Bill Rose, said to Stanley one night when they were having dinner, you know, what do you think about this story that I'm thinking about, maybe going in Africa, that this white man comes to Africa and falls in love with an African American, and what do her family think? And he said, well, I don't think that's half as interesting as if an African American marries a white girl and what her family thinks. Anyway, he kind of shoved that idea. It was just a conversation at dinner. So Stanley was originally for Columbia after Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Oh, before Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was supposed to do Andersonville. He worked on Andersonville for about 2 or 3 years. They canceled it, and they owed Stanley a film. So he called up Bill and said, remember that story we were talking about a few years ago when we did Mad World? He said, look, I'm going to fly into London. Bill lived on a little island outside of London, off the coast of London. He said, and let's talk about this. And so Stanley said, this is how I think it would be important. So they wrote it together. Stanley was a really wonderful writer. He made his career as a writer before he ever became a producer, then producer-director. So that's how it was born, actually. And Sidney Poitier said, Stanley, do you think the country is ready for a story like this? Stanley says, nope, but we're going to make it anyhow. So I don't know how it was a play. He made it purposely as a fantasy in a way, because Sidney Poitier's character was so perfect. He was a doctor. He was educated. He was doing great work. Who wouldn't be thrilled if their daughter was marrying someone like that? Except for one reason. He was African American. So that was the point of the film. And of course, you know, if you want a subject to go down that people are not comfortable with, you make it a little more funny, a little more lighthearted, and it's easier to accept a serious subject.
Well, Isabel Sanford's character in the film, she didn't like him, so that balanced everything
It balanced
out,
it.
correct?
Yeah, that's right. We found her in a play. She was working with B. Richards in a play in Hollywood. We went to see it. We were looking for that part. She had never done a film before, which is typical of Stanley. He always liked to take people who had never done a film before. And we cast her, and that opened up her career. And so I think she was great in the film. But you know, there was a lot of controversy on the African American side too. I mean, after that film was made very, very successful, and Sidney Poitier, of course, was successful anyway, But he was never a romantic leading man, if you look at his work before that. And he came to Stanley, and I was there that day, and he said, at the office, and he said, Stanley, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, I don't really fit in with my own generation, with my own culture, because they don't accept me now because of this. And I certainly don't fit in with the whites either. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel lost. And he said, well, if I were you, I wouldn't, I just keep moving forward. He said, you know, I've got a great idea for you. Why don't you stop acting? Why don't you direct? Why don't you start directing? And he did. He started directing. He was very successful. And then, of course, time went on, and people got more comfortable with the whole idea, and it was great advice. And so that's what happened on that one.
Let's talk a little bit about your television experience in anthologies. Tell us about working on Playhouse 90 and those programs, and how something like that wouldn't be so easy to do today, and why you might think that is the case.
Live television is a whole different animal, I'm telling you. It is terrifying. I came from the stage, so I had done a lot of theater before I got my first film break. So I kind of knew a little bit about that medium. I always felt more uncomfortable in film. I felt more comfortable on the stage. So naturally, live TV, which was like theater, except it combined both mediums. It combined theater and film. And you still had to hit your marks, you know, so you wouldn't be out of the shot of the camera. The very first thing I did was The Life of Moses for Hallmark Hall of Fame. That was the first live show, was Hallmark Hall of Fame, which I was very lucky to star in that. It was successful, and so then I continued to do another Hallmark Hall of Fame, which was Martha Washington. George Washington, I was Martha Washington, and then The Life of Henry Ford. And interestingly enough, the man who played Henry Ford was in my very first film for Stanley, who I never met Stanley at that time, however. I just had 3 lines. I was in high school. I had 3 lines in the film called The Sniper. Arthur Franz was the star of that. I met him briefly. Then I ended up working with him, and I played his wife, played Mrs. Henry Ford on Hallmark Hall of Fame. The producer of that Hallmark Hall of Fame had a really good idea. And so the very first live hour in color, not all television was in color in those days, at NBC was called Matinee Theater. And it was a 5-day, once a day, for 5 days a week. Went on for several years, and he would star Jack Lemmon one day and me the next.
What time was it on during the day?
From 12 to 1. And so I did a lot of matinee theaters. And some of those directors became major directors. The very first thing Arthur Hiller ever directed, Arthur Hiller became a major director in film, was with me. True of Lamont Johnson, true of many directors who were getting their first breaks in live TV.
Did you ever work on Robert Montgomery Presents? Did you ever do that?
No, I would love to have done that, but no, I didn't. But I did Playhouse 90s and Studio One, and I went, and Lux Radio Theater became live, General Electric Theater became live, and so all the live shows, they always called on me because luckily there was never any problems with
you knew your stuff.
Well, no, what you do in a situation like that is you learn everybody else's lines. And then you check during the commercial, you go run around and make sure the props are there. Because it'd be terrible if the gun wasn't going to be there or something wasn't there you had to use. And if you ran into the commercial, you would just never work again. So it was pretty scary. But I was young and daring at the time, so it didn't bother me that much. But I still went on to do a lot of television. And I had been under contract to John Wayne after The High and the Mighty. I was the only person he would put under contract, I guess because of the Golden Globe. But I went to him and I said, look, I'm so thrilled that you have me under contract to you. But he was an independent company, just releasing through Warner's. I said, but I'm too young to play opposite you. And to loan me out, all the other studios had their contract players. So would you allow me to go to television? And the reason I asked him that was if you were in motion pictures and you were successful, you would never lower yourself to go to TV. That would be like a no-no. But I said, but I'm not going to ever continue to learn anything. Just being under contract, I'm not going to work. Would you allow me to do it? And he said, absolutely. You go right ahead. And so I worked all the time. I was one of these lucky people that was never looking for a job. I did I did all the shows, you know, Gunsmoke twice, all the westerns. Oh my God, there was all these
Laredo?
westerns.
You did Laredo? Did you?
Who?
Laredo?
Laredo?
Laredo.
No. I heard that one. Okay. Well, there were so many, you know. God, what wasn't a western?
Yeah.
And
I think there were like 100 westerns on it.
there was, and I did
Yeah.
all of them. I didn't do that one though, and I didn't do a couple of other shows that I didn't guest on, but everything else I did.
So what do you think of television today?
Oh, I think all the social issues are more in television today than they are in motion pictures. I really do. I think there's some really wonderful shows. I'm a big fan, actually. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not as good as in my day." Oh, that's not true.
Well, it is a new golden age in many ways.
Oh, I think it's all exciting things. They're very inventive. I think they take a lot of chances, a lot of risks in TV. All the social issues are also in documentaries today. I mean, look at Netflix, for God's sake. They do some of the most fantastic shows. I want to be on them, you know, but I don't act anymore. I just produce now. But I think it's exciting. And some of those reality shows. One little story I got to tell you. About 15 years ago, this man came to me, and he said, "Look," he said, "you know, I want to do a reality show like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Would you join me?" I said, "Absolutely not. A reality show for Mad World? I wouldn't even think of it." Okay, that's The Amazing Race. They're going to their 16th Emmy now. So he came to me about a year ago, and he said, I'd be happy to join you now. And so we're trying to bring It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, a whole different version of It's a Mad World. We can't remake that film. It's just too iconic, too many fans. We get criticized up the wazoo if we tried to remake that. Even a sequel, I wrote a sequel about 10 years ago. I thought it was pretty damn good, but listen, it's too difficult when you have an icon like that.
And there still is a message in that film as well.
It's about greed. We thought we were greedy in '63. Well, look at us now. Anyway, so anyway, I'm joining him, and we're trying to do a whole new take on Mad World, trying to bring a reality show into motion pictures. So it's breaking new ground. With hope. We're working on it.
Well, thank you so much, and you can stick around because we're all going to do questions afterwards.
All right, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's have a nice hand.
I was going to read about Mickey Rooney.
Okay.
Can I do that just 1 second?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
because, you know, really and truly, this is a book I'm looking forward to because he was, to me, the iconic actor of all time. What couldn't he do? Everything he did, from singing, dancing, to acting, no matter what he played. And he was a very good dramatic actor as well. And we made 2 films with Mickey, starting with Mad World. And then another film that wasn't that great, called The Domino Principle, where he played a convict. And he was very serious, very dangerous guy. And a lot of his films, a lot of his scenes got edited because the studio at that time did not understand the film. And they edited 20 minutes out of it when you really didn't understand it then. Just hated that film. But Mickey's performance was to die for. He was so fabulous in this film. I just want to say a little bit about what Stanley wrote about him, if I can find it in here. Here. He said, "I had known Mickey Rooney before. I knew him quite well, and I admired him for his skills, both as a comedian and as a dramatic actor. I've always felt that he received too little credit. I can't say enough about the extent of his talent and his knowledge of every facet of show business. Even in his small roles, as in The Domino Principle, he made a big impression on me because of the subtle things he did. Having spent his entire life in show business, Mickey knew every trick there was, and he used every one of them in his comedy routines." He was, and to me, and his family too, and many of us, all the true greats. So I'm glad you're looking
Thank
forward
you.
to this book. Okay.
I appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
And he really was Andy Hardy. Okay.
Let's put on a show.
Oh, well,
Yes, yes.
Okay.
When you
You're not going to have time for anybody else.
We'll take a break.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I was growing up in Texas, we didn't have anything to do. It wasn't very cosmopolitan. There actually was not television in those days. All we had was the movies. And if I was a good girl, I got to go to the movies on Saturday night with my mother and father. And of course, I was raised on MGM movies, and particularly on Andy Hardy. So I loved Andy Hardy. Now, this is when I was 6 years old, 7 years old. I was very young. Anyway, during World War II, we were selling war bonds, and MGM Studios sent many of their actors to San Antonio, Texas, where I was living, to sell war bonds and to promote, the stars were promoting those bonds. So Mickey came with Judy Garland and many other stars from MGM, and I got a chance to meet him. And I kept saying, he's not Mickey Rooney, Mother. His name is Andy Hardy. Please, don't embarrass me this way. Anyway, that's all I knew about him. Then my life changed. I came to Hollywood. I began to work and things. And I didn't get a chance to meet him until much later on. Stanley had an operation. I met Stanley, married him, gave up my acting career. And Stanley was in the hospital having a very serious cancer operation, which he did not have cancer, but we didn't know it at the time. Nobody knew this. It was a big secret. And I'm sitting in his room waiting for him to come out of surgery, which he was there for about 6 hours. The phone rings in the private room, and he says, hello. I said, hello. And he said, is this Mrs. Kramer? I said, yes, it is. He said, how is Stanley? I said, wait a minute. Is this Mickey Rooney? He had a voice you could always recognize his voice, you know? He said, yes, Karen. I had never met him except when I was a little girl. And he talked to me for almost 1 hour straight, encouraging me about the fact that I'm not going to have anything to worry about. Stanley's going to be fine. I never forgot that. It stuck with me. He was the only person who ever called, who really cared to call and take the time to spend an hour with me, making me feel comfortable and hopeful. So through the years, we've had many celebrations of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. I did the 40th anniversary, the 50th anniversary, and all the in-betweens. And he always said yes. I will be there, just like Marvin Kaplan here. Always said yes. And the last 50th anniversary was 2 years ago. He came out for me, I think, about 3 times that year. And he was just so different than I had ever worked with him before. He was like young. He would sit me down on the chair next to him, and he'd say, you know, I've got this whole idea for a motion picture. He said, now you're going to produce it, and I'm going to tell you the whole story about it right now. I said, okay, tell me all about it. He really was Andy Hardy. I mean, I have to tell you, the last year of his life, he looked better than he'd looked, and I don't know when. He dressed immaculately with a little bow tie and everything. And I know that Marvin will remember this. He was adorable. He was so cute, and I'm so glad to remember him just like I first met him. So anyway, he was Andy Hardy.